Welcome to Manager Tools. Manager Tools Internal Pandemic Response, Part 2. This cast answers these questions. What has Manager Tools done to address the pandemic? What internal actions has Manager Tools taken? What can small companies do? Well, if you want answers to these questions and more, keep listening. Here we go.
Folks, if you're listening to this, you're probably still under some form of self-quarantine or shelter in place. We know you can't attend our conferences. Your company, if your company's hired us recently to come deliver training on site, of course, that's not happening because that would be a disaster for the spread of the virus. And so our recommendation now is that you consider becoming a licensee. For $200 a year, you get access to all the show notes, literally the documents Mike and I use when we record the podcast. So you don't have to spend time listening to me. You get access to things I think. You get special opportunities with us. And finally, I would say that it's a way to support our efforts to spread the message of every manager effective and every professional productive.
Okay, folks, if you haven't listened to Part 1, I would suggest you go and do that before continue on to Part 2 of this cast. And last, we ended by talking kind of in general about our second point, start with cash. And after talking about some principles and some kind of general recommendations there, we thought we'd share with you what we're doing here at Manager Tools. So, Mark, what have we done?
We've never done this before. We generally don't hold ourselves out as paragons. We're like the rest of you, that we know what the guidance is and we do it. And sometimes we do it exceptionally well, and sometimes we do it okay, and sometimes we stumble. A lot of people ask me, hey, how did you learn this stuff? And I kind of get the impression that question is, I learned it and then I started doing it and somehow that turned into this. And I say, no, that's not how it works. We don't teach what we do here at Manager Tools. We're not doing what so many other guidance people are doing in the management field, is extrapolating from their anecdotal experience to a larger audience and recommending that you do what they do. I don't know about you guys, but when I've read some books, biographies and so on from people, I'm amazed at how either I don't understand what they were saying they did and how it related when they generalize it, but in many cases it doesn't apply to me and to my situation. In our case, we did just the opposite. We don't teach what we do. We do what we teach. And our teachings comes from years of gathering data about how managers and professionals behave and what works better and what doesn't. And we like to say that it's not perfect. We recommend, we believe that our guidance is good for 90% of the managers in the world, 90% of the time. What that means is that there's 10% of you whose situations are so different that this may not apply. Of course, everyone thinks that their situation is in the 10%, which just doesn't work math-wise. And then there are situations where even though you've been listening to us, there are, we can't recommend you follow everything we say exactly to the letter because situations vary. But we thought it would be helpful in this case to hear how we've addressed this crisis internally. I don't like it when we talk big picture and people think that I'm hectoring them and admonishing them. And so we'll just tell you exactly what we did internally in the last 3 to 4 weeks to address what we saw as a huge recession coming. And the beauty of preparing for a huge recession is even if it turns out to be a small recession, you're fine. But if you prepare for a small recession and it turns out to be huge, you may have a comeuppance at some point. We don't want that.
Yeah. Well, being a small company helps a little bit, right?
Yeah. So if you haven't read it, one of the pieces of guidance, one of the stories that's coming out now in the news is how important it is to have cash as a company. If you're in the business of providing people physical goods and services, if you're in a dress shop or many other things, if you own a retail store that isn't, a restaurant, but it isn't exempted from some of the laws, you're in a situation where you don't have any cash coming in. So what happens in that situation is you're supposed to have cash built up. And most of us don't think about, well, big companies, surely they have a lot of cash. Actually, no, they don't. Some do, some don't. But in small companies, interestingly enough, there are two types of common accounting in the world. One is cash-based accounting, which is what many, if not most, small companies use. But at some point between 10 employees and 50 employees, you go to the big boys accounting, which is called accrual accounting. But it's easy if you're in the cash accounting business to know exactly how much cash you have. And you know, as an owner, what it feels like to spend the cash. And anywhere you turn in small companies, if you read 1,000 books on Amazon about managing or growing or owning a small company, they all say, have cash, have cash. They may say many other things, but they say cash. Okay. So we hear that as we're thinking about our business, we hear that all the time. But, we were talking about big companies. Some have cash, some don't. Even small companies, same thing. Some have cash, some don't. And look, I would argue there's guidance that's popular that has subverted the idea of you have to have cash. One of the things I've mentioned before that I don't like is the government, any government, saying we should have more entrepreneurs. This is just dumb, okay? Because you shouldn't be listening to the government telling you should be an entrepreneur or you should consider it, or even taking on debt to get a loan from the government in order to become an entrepreneur. The one rule you should have, actually, there are two rules you should have regarding starting your own company is one, I'm excited about being in sales. If you're not willing to say that, if you don't mean that, you probably shouldn't be in a small business. And the other one is I'm prepared to die for this. If you can't say those two things, you don't get it. and the idea that the government is going to encourage you should start your own thing because entrepreneurs and small business are the heart of the economy and so on. Yeah, that's
you might want to like people a little bit too. Just say like customers.
Well, that's the sales thing, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
the genius coder who wants to put out a great product, great, but if nobody buys it, you're not going to get very far. Anyway, when you have these people saying, "Oh, you should run with your ideas," you should, oh, look, hey, if you're really smart and you have a really good product, you can get venture capital. But one of the ways you're going to have to get venture capital is to have an elevator speech where you can describe to people what you do and how you do it in 1 minute, so on. And there are classes for elevator speeches, or, you should chase your dreams, be your own boss. Of course, not if you get VC money. That one's funny. And then they hold out the idea that, in some ad for being an entrepreneur, that pictures of billionaires. Yeah, because that's going to happen. And look, there are successes. But those are the startups that get covered. For every unicorn, the $1 billion valuation small company or startup or whatever, there are 1,000 or more bankruptcies or similar shutting downs or sales, fire sale prices, and so on. And part of this is because of the challenge of being a small company. What most small companies want to be, and some people challenge me on this, and I thought to myself, apparently they never run a small company. What most small companies want more than anything else is growth, because what they want is to be big. But if you do the math, guys, if you take some economics and so on, most growth eats your cash, okay? Because as I'm making, I don't know, $1 million a year, if I want to make $2 million a year, I have to spend the $1 million I made on enough supplies that will justify 2 million in sales. This happens all the time.
Yeah, and rinse, lather, repeat on that, right? Right, that you make 2 million and spend the 2 million.
Yeah, it happens all the time. Companies are profitable and go out of business because they don't have any cash. If a small company doesn't have cash because they're trying to grow, because they've been greedy themselves or whatever, when the market turns south, it's harsh. It's brutal. There's almost no amount of cutting without cutting lots of people that can save a small growth company through a long downturn. So we're particularly sensitive. Now you may feel that we're the canary in the coal mine and you don't need to respond that way. We respect that. We understand that. But if we see the tsunami coming, we're not going to stand on the beach and say, well, I'm going to start running because I want to conserve my voice. I wouldn't want to be out of breath by telling the rest of the people, hey, there's a tsunami coming. Let's be clear, guys. We're naturally conservative here as managers. Our mission is to make every manager in the world effective. There's no way that's going to happen in Mike and I's lifetimes. Okay. So we have to be, if we're interested in our mission, as opposed to our lives, we have to be about building a company that will last for hundreds of years, as we are about providing as much guidance as we can in a profitable way. If we knew that in every downturn we could make it through, but we were only marginally profitable our entire career, that'd be fine. We would rather not go through periods of wild profitability followed by periods of wild loss, because sooner or later one of those losses is too big and you're out of the game. Okay. And some people manage that differently. I mean, one of the worst phrases in the world is burn rate. What's your burn rate? Literally counting how much cash you're spending without making any money. Yeah, the solution to that is customers, by the way. And I know many of you are listening and say, wow, that's not what I hear normally. Yes, we disagree with the common wisdom because we think wisdom isn't that common. So here at Manager Tools, we have lots of cash relative to the economic rules and guidance about small companies. When the pandemic hit and the economic effects became so obvious, we're only a $5 million gross company. We had over $1 million in cash. That's 20% of our gross revenue, which is just crazy high. Okay. Most people who know small companies would not only say that's plenty, they would say, oh my gosh, that's too much. And you could be using that. You could be investing it. You should be investing it back in your company.
We're not leveraging it, right?
Yeah, exactly. We need to, you can turn that 5 into 10 if you'll just risk more of your cash. But look, guys, it's more complicated than that. How do we do that? This is guidance particularly for those of you in small companies, but it's helpful for the rest of you too as well. We leave a lot of money in the company. And that's painful for us because due to the tax laws that apply to companies like ours, a limited liability company, an LLC, we have to pay taxes on that money, even if Mike and I don't take it out of the company. Okay. If you pay us to attend a conference 6 months from now, we take your money if you use a credit card, but we don't spend that money or even think of it as spendable until we deliver the conference to you. Okay. That's not what most small companies do.
Yeah. We think of it as a liability, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's an asset. We got the cash, but there's also an offsetting liability. Most small companies don't do that. They get an income and that income's in the till to spend. If you sign up for a conference a year from now, we hold that cash that you gave us for a year, even though that means we have to pay taxes on it before we get to have it, if you will, whatever's left of after taxes, as spendable income. Now, look, you might think that's too conservative. We could argue about that. And if there's an opportunity for growth, then you could make that case. We would say we would rather not have a culture where we spend on growth if there's a risk that we won't have the cash when we need it during a downturn. But look, think about it. What happens if you pay us and a pandemic hits? Here's our logic as well. If you pay us and a pandemic hits and you want a refund, what happens? What if you've already spent your money? Well, I'll tell you what a lot of companies are doing. They're saying, we'll give you credit for next year. That's why travel companies and other companies are saying, I just got a note from somebody about a summer camp for his, I think, 11-year-old daughter. And they sent him a note, just like they sent me a note for my golf trip this summer to Ireland. They said, if you've already given us money, you can have 100% full credit for next year, not 100% refund. And the reason why is they're spending the money. They don't have it. Okay. or they have it, but they've determined that budget-wise, they have to spend it on other things in order to stay in business. We're different. Be that good or bad, up to you. We think good. We have a no questions asked refund policy. So if you've spent the money, but we haven't delivered the conference, you get your money back. Actually, if you come to a conference and then say you didn't like it, we'll give you your money back. I don't think that's ever happened, actually. Now, look, we believe the quality of our work and our relationship with you. Actually, I say we believe, but I mean, we're making a judgment call here. But the quality of the work, our relationship with you has caused 70% of the people that we had scheduled to attend conferences in the previous month and the next 6 months and so on, they chose to defer their attendance to a future conference, okay, rather than cancel. Now, the reason I say we believe is because I don't know that it's the quality of our work. I can't guarantee you that it's our relationship. But regardless, in our case, we're conservative. We have the money for all those people. So those people who chose to cancel, and actually it's 70%. And then there's another 10 or 15% who haven't told us what they want to do. And there's about 15% who've asked for their money back. And by the way, you might very well be in a situation where you need to ask for your money back because your company is struggling. And we respect that. That's fine. That's how the world works. It's okay. But as you'll see, as we walk through this next part where we talk about cutting expenses, $1 million in cash, 20% of our revenues year to year may not have been enough. Mike and I aren't saying, oh, we're good. We're good for the next 2 years. We're not. We're absolutely addressing this and we're concerned. We're not worried, but we're concerned and we're taking super aggressive action. And I'll tell you something else. We thought $1 million was enough. We now agree it's got to be more than that. And yet still more if we continue to grow. But we discovered there were all kinds of cuts we could make to improve our situation drastically. And as I'll share later, I feel like we were doing so good. And then I look at some of this stuff and I say, what were we thinking?
Yeah.
That's
amazing.
Yeah, good. Okay. So now we're going to talk about cutting expenses.
Yeah. And this is the key to surviving in a downturn, right?
Yeah.
This is the whole race, don't chase, which we've referred to at least 5 times so far.
If you've not listened to Race, Don't Chase, guys, you've got to listen to it as one of the fundamental principles of managing or organizing a company or a division or a group or whatever, or frankly, even your family. Race, Don't Chase may be one of the top 5 most important economic ideas I've ever heard in my professional career.
Yeah, and right now it's I hate to say this, but if you're listening to this podcast and you haven't listened to Race, Don't Chase, you should stop right now and go listen to it. I mean, it's that important, folks.
Yeah. When you see it, when you understand what we mean by Race, Don't Chase, you'll just say, wow. I'll tell you, Race, Don't Chase is in part why Warren Buffett, when markets bottom out during recessions, buys companies on the cheap and then suddenly makes billions and billions and billions of dollars.
Another nice thing about having cash.
Yeah, having cash in a downturn. That's important. Okay, so look, and by the way, if you're thinking about cutting, that's not this guidance. This guidance is cut fast and cut hard. As we talked about this in our Career Tools cast last week on personal frugality. There are all kinds of chances for you in the days ahead to preserve what cash you do have and extend your security. And guys, let's be clear. We believe, now we're not economists and, predicting the future is an inherently difficult thing to do. It's impossible. Actually, I think my favorite quote about if you want to predict the future, create it. But I'm sorry, we 3 or 4 of us here can't possibly create a different future than the coming economic recession. And by the way, I just read a blog post on not being alpha or growing alpha that said a market person that said it's not going to be a recession, it's going to be a depression for all kinds of reasons. If you don't believe the economy is going to go south, I think we've already have somebody said there's close to 10 million people already unemployed. And you might think, oh, those people are all going to come back. right? They're all going to be reemployed very quickly. Whereas typically in a downturn, a layoff, a company thinks, if I can't afford the guy for 6 months to a year, I have to lay him off. And so what that means is for 6 months to a year, that person or their slot, there's one less slot in the economy for that person. You might assume that all these people are going to come back. But unfortunately, if we have an economy that has too many organizations without cash and they have to go out of business, even with government intervention, we're going to have people that are, it's going to last a lot longer. It may be 6 months. It may be a year. And again, even if you cut fast and cut hard and it's not that bad, you still get incredible benefit out of the process because, as Peter Drucker says, you do not control costs, you cut costs.
Yeah. And folks, if you disagree with this and you think that it's going to turn around quickly and there won't be a recession or depression, then okay, fine. But you'd have to admit, if you're thinking, you'd have to think that it is possible that could happen. And if it is possible, the only time to be prepared for it is now. Now you have to take action now to be ready for that. And if you take action and it doesn't happen, hey, good.
Yeah, let's put it this way. We had a lot of cash. The guidance is have a lot of cash. There's an old saying, the worst time in the world to have a son is 18 years before a war. Well, the worst time in the world not to be hoarding cash is before the next recession. So it's good to have a lot of cash. And we've talked about that. Okay. Now you're in a place where you have to decide, do I have a lot of cash or not? Maybe you do. Maybe you don't. We already have a lot of cash and now we're cutting expenses hard. So if you don't have a lot of cash and you don't cut expenses hard, I'm going to say to you, things are going to get tough, and I'll pray for you and I wish you the very best. And it's going to be tough. There's no question about it. So you're going to be amazed at the place's costs and perniciously for us, hidden costs. They're not hidden. We just take them for granted, have crept into your daily life. Look, I'll give you a perfect example. All you have to do is look at your iPhone or your Android phone right now. In an iPhone, you click on settings, you click on your name at the very top of the settings menu that comes up, and then click on what is probably the fourth line down, subscriptions. You'll discover very few of those items listed in subscriptions are necessary. If you're paying money for anything fun, holy Toledo, get rid of it. Unsubscribe immediately. If you're worried about a layoff, it will immediately help you feel like you're moving in the direction of hoarding cash. And here's the problem. You think, well, it's $1 or $2. I found $200 in subscriptions on my phone. And by the way, I'm not a particularly busy user of apps. All of my apps fit on the front page of my phone. Now, I have some groupings on the phone. I think I have a grouping for travel. I have a grouping for utilities like dictionary and stuff like that. And I have one for golf, which I had 4 things in there that I was paying a couple of bucks a month for. Okay. Even if you think you can afford it, get rid of it, because it will start you on the road of, I'm getting rid of everything I don't need. And by need, we mean food, clothing, and shelter. And look, I said, we want you moving in the direction of feeling like you're hoarding cash. Hoarding isn't a positive word, but I'll tell you what, you could absolutely use that word about the ant in The Ant and the Grasshopper fable. Okay. The ant survived the winter because he hoarded food. And they don't talk about this very much in the modern versions, the sanitized versions. The grasshopper died. Okay, that's what happened. So for me, I'll give you some examples personally. No more juice. I don't need apple juice or grape juice. No more bottled water. Get it from the tap and put it in a tumbler. No more cream in your coffee. Learn to drink it black. No more Sirius XM radio in your car. You can get by for a few weeks. If you have a modern car, mine's a 65, but if you have a modern car, there's a good enough radio in there, you'll live.
And they still have AM radio, right? You can get that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, most modern cars also have an aux cable, so you can listen to your playlists, or you can listen to Maneater Tools. You maybe listen to Maneater Tools right now, driving around, although there sure isn't much driving around. No more $4 lattes, no more books, no more music. Get a library card. Drink crappy coffee. If a barista is involved in the preparation of your coffee, you're spending too much money. And believe me, Starbucks will be fine. Don't buy any more clothes for a while, and on and on and on and on. Look, guys, I'm telling you, it shouldn't be beneath you, if you're in the US anyway, to go to a Goodwill store for clothes for your growing kids. Do not let pride be the thing that keeps you from staying solvent in the next 6 months. Pride goeth before the fall. Okay, we recommend you listen to the Career Tools Frugality Cast. Go to iTunes or Google Play Store. Download our free feed on the pandemics. It's got 20 or 30 casts about layoffs, I think, and many of them address finances. Our first layoff cast from years ago, it may have been 2008, was called Finances Rule. Folks, we're looking for ways to share with you our guidance during this time of coronavirus. And I think a simple one is our two books, The Effective Manager and The Effective Hiring Manager. Both are available from Amazon. They're probably also available at your local bookstore, but don't go there. And if you want a signed copy of either one of them, you can come to our website, and we have signed copies, and we'll be happy to ship them to you. You will learn everything you need to know to hire somebody or to roll out the Trinity: one-on-ones, feedback, coaching, and delegation. Okay, so now we're talking about cost cutting. Okay, what did we do? Okay, without cash, we might have had to do what so many other firms have to do and cut our biggest cost, which are salaries. If you don't know it, if you do a pie chart of all the costs, all the aggregated costs and all the different groupings or subgroupings that accounting software uses, typically the pie chart looks like there's a whole bunch of little slices and there's one massive slice that's 50% of the pie, and that's people. Okay? But look, guys, we made a commitment. We make a commitment when we hire somebody. We tell people, don't come to work here unless you intend to stay for your entire life, your career. Okay. Well, of course, that means if we're going to make that commitment to them, then we have to make a commitment back. Or if we're going to ask for that commitment from them, we're going to have to make a commitment back that we can justify their faith in us. So we have to manage our company to be able to weather a storm as bad as this one is going to be. Okay, so here's what we did. The first thing we did is Mike, who is essentially handles everything behind the scenes at the company. We looked at major but non-payroll recurring costs. And by the way, it helped our team, Kate and Maggie and Sarah and Wendy and Paul and Tracy, everybody, okay? It helped them to know that we weren't looking at salaries. Mike and Tracy, our accounting associate, use QuickBooks Online, which is our software, to look at every category of spending we had, including QuickBooks, by the way, for which we spend $3,000 a year.
And you may ask yourself, well, what does that mean specifically? It means that I looked at every single charge the entire company made in the last year. Every single one.
And then the rest of us did too, for those charges that were associated with our corporate credit cards.
Yes, you did.
Right? And luckily with some good accounting software, but you could do this without the accounting software. It would just take you 30 hours to do it. And if you have a small company, you would stop doing anything else and do this. In fact, I know that CEOs a couple of weeks ago started asking their CFOs of big companies, tell me where we are, because in the accrual business, the accrual method of accounting, it's not as obvious where things are. And so there are reviews done about accounts and how much are in them and which one, whether there are already invoices into the company for work already done that essentially is a lien, if you will, on that money and so on. And there are senior executives who don't know how much cash they have in their company. And you shouldn't blame them about it. In fact, most big companies today don't think of it as cash. And this is can be a mistake in times like this. It is a reasonable mistake to make, but it's a mistake nonetheless, because what they say is, okay, I don't have time to go scrounge all the cash I have and where it is and so on. I want to manage my way through this. And so they get debt. They say, okay, I don't need to have cash, but I want very, very, very low interest debt. And I think it's safe to say that right now in the world, there will be a lot of low interest debt available to larger companies. But you know what? It probably won't be made available to us. I don't think so. I don't think there'll be enough money to go around. Okay. So Mike went through it line by line. And of course, it was grouped, and he looked at all the groupings and so on. And now we're going to go through and tell you things we found that we knew we could cut. Mike came back pretty quickly to me and said, here are some opportunities right away to get more money, to free up more cash. In other words, we don't have to, going forward, we're not going to spend this money. Now, keep in mind the math here, guys. We had $1 million in cash. And for purposes of argument, we have roughly $1 million a year in payroll. Okay. So what that means is, of course, there are some expenses we have to incur whether we want to or not. We have to pay for server time and bandwidth, downloads, and so on. There are all kinds of operational things. So we have something less than a year's worth of cash for salaries if we have $1 million. And actually, because of some bills that hadn't been paid yet in the previous week or so, we probably had 8 months.
Yeah, 8 months sounds about right.
Okay. And maybe. It doesn't really matter exactly how much, because you don't want to say 7 weeks, 7 months and 3/4 or 8 months, because the economic system is the economic situation is so fluid and changing. You could only be as close as a month or two. Okay. So we're going through and asking, what can we cut out to decrease? Remember this. We're not thinking about increasing our cash by cutting expenses. All we're doing is decreasing our spend. We're slowing the rate of cash depletion. We can't not deplete our cash reserves during a time when we might take in less money than our salaries and other obligations to keep the company up and running are incurred every month. So remember, we said we're going to have cash, but now we're not trying to get more cash. We're just trying to cut the burn on the cash, to use a really bad word. Okay. So what did we find? Mike goes through the list, and Mike found we spend roughly $9,000 a month on external software development support. Okay. Now look, we have a great relationship with our vendors, but that's $100,000 a year in savings. Since it's all of this spending, except for a very small amount, a minor percentage, is for future upgrades and new products that we're constantly putting out, roadmap. And we were developing a product. We're developing the Manager Tools version of Disk, and that takes some money and so on. None of those future products will matter if there's not a company. It makes no sense to spend money on those things if there's not a company to take in revenue to justify them. So we cut $8,500 a month out of that. Okay, we're still spending $500, and we think that's a reasonable choice to make. That may change if things get much, much worse. Okay, we spend, in addition, on average, $3,000 a month on office equipment. The bulk of that is new computers, iPhones, phones, other devices. Frankly, we've probably been too generous with that. If you want a new phone, go get a new phone. But now we keep the old one as a spare in case someone breaks it. We require people to have cases on their phones, but we pay for the cases. Okay. So again, we've probably been too generous with that. We cut it all. We can get by with what we have for a year. And by the way, we checked our spares, or supply closet, if you will, recently, and discovered there wasn't anything in there, which is kind of good, but will incur a cost if somebody breaks something that's critical. Okay. And as an aside, I'll mention, because I don't think it's in the show notes, we just figured out that everybody who travels has an iPad that has both Wi-Fi and cellular, so that you could hypothetically use the iPad if you can't use your laptop and have connectivity if you need connectivity to all of our databases and so on. So we paid Mike, was it $250 a month?
$250 a month. Yeah.
And so we went to the presenters, and Mike and I agreed that for ours, we'd just shut down cellular service for a few months.
Yeah. We had people have Apple Watches. Apple Watches have cellular.
That's cellular service.
That's $10 a month per
$10 a month.
Apple Watch. So we're cutting that.
Yep.
Folks, these are relatively small numbers, but they add up.
I'm going to say something that many people are going to not like, but I've been doing this a long time. I just got accused in an email of being a racist. So I'm going to be really blunt and speak truth to power. The reason why many people cut personnel is because it's easy. If you want to be great, don't choose the easy life. The reason we went through every line is because we made a commitment to our people. Okay. You can fault us for that. You can disagree. You could say, well, you should have cut this person or something. You would have spent way less time and you gotten the same benefit or so on. Yeah, maybe so. That's not us. We'd rather go out of business being who we are and who we want to be than stay in business, become somebody we're not proud of. We spend $4,000, or used to until last week, we spent $4,000 a month on car service to and from airports. And also when I take car service to go up to Silicon Valley to present for our clients up there. Well, okay, we don't need that. Now, it's incredibly helpful for me because I can work in the car up and back. But I don't care whether I get $5,000 worth of work out of a $400 car service ride to something that's 2.5 or 3 hours away from me. I don't care how much value I get out of it. I now know we're only thinking about costs, and I could save the $400. I can drive myself. We could use Uber, but heck, I think there's some question whether or not Uber and Lyft and those guys will survive. I wonder how much cash they had on hand. I bet not a lot. We spend $3,000 a month on travel not directly related to delivering conferences or client work. Rather than saying, well, let's go back and analyze which ones we did and what should we agree. We just cut it. We cut it all.
Yeah.
Zero. You can't have it. You're not going anywhere that Manager Tools is going to pay for unless you're going to a client or you're going to a conference, period. End of story. Okay. We have, because we use American Express cards, 680,000 Amex points saved up. It sounds like a lot, but actually the exchange rate isn't all that impressive. But it does translate to $700, actually a little bit more than $700, closer to $750 a month for the foreseeable future for airline tickets. Now, it's not cash, but it saves our cash. And so nobody gets to buy an airline ticket with Manager Tools money without spending those American Express points. Now, that makes things administratively a little bit harder. I think we actually have to go through American Express to do it, but we don't care. We're saving cash any way we can. And during a downturn is not the time to complain about how much harder your work has gotten. Because if there's a way to make your work harder and protect your salary in return for us saving cash, we're going to do it, period.
Yeah. Then there's some expenses that we looked at. I'm thinking specifically about costs for airline travel agents. We spend about $700 a month on that.
Yeah.
And do I like spending that $700 a month? No, but we spend it in support of those traveling and in support of our customers.
Yeah. Look, we could make the bookings ourselves online. That said, I will tell you that whatever you're looking at online, whatever service you're using is making money on the other side of your transaction by positioning certain people in certain places and so on. And our travel schedules tend to be pretty tight. But look, if a presenter gets stranded at a snowed-in airport or misses a connection, moving quickly to address that and having access to lots of data that is not manipulated by cash paid to the person who's presenting it to you can absolutely save the day. I'm sorry, guys, you can't do that on your phone. Not even with our advanced status. I think all of our travelers are executive platinum or whatever the equivalent is on American or whatever else. Even with a different phone number to call, you just can't, it's not the same thing. We fly 400,000 to 500,000 air miles a year as a company. So we see the $700 a month as insurance and we're going to keep paying it. Now, look, if it were $5,000 a month, that'd be different. Okay. And for now, since we're not traveling, the cost associated with not cutting that is zero. We essentially are saving money by not spending cash because it makes no sense to travel anywhere. And as well, related to travel, I'll mention two other things. One, we had to go and find out from our travel agent how many non-refundable but still credited tickets did we have for each person, the three presenters, me and Kate and Sarah, and on which airlines. And we will be telling everybody, we will go through those monies first, right? Because we already gave them that cash, so we're essentially going to claw it back, if you will, by using it. And what that may mean, unfortunately, is the best flight for me to go to Philadelphia, I'm making that up, might be on American, but if I have more money purchased on United, I'm going to use United. I may have to get in way late or early the next morning, but I'm not going to spend cash until we have used up all of our reserves of already bought tickets that end up not being refunded. But don't kid yourself, not refunded doesn't mean you don't have an asset with the airline. You do. If that made sense. I feel like I said that really poorly, but there you go. If you have questions, send me an email, mahorseman@manager-tools.com. Okay. Another thing, Mike discovered in his analysis that we spend an additional $5,000 a month on the difference between coach and first class tickets. And we decided not to cut that. Now, part of the reason we decided not to cut it,
we're not traveling.
is we're not traveling, right? We're absolutely not. And we think there will be discounted fares ahead. And so that number will not be as big. But, and Mike, who sometimes flies across the country on a fairly regular basis, said, I'm willing to fly coach. And I said, don't be crazy, because this was at the time 2 weeks ago when you would have potentially been sitting in a very crowded airplane. And I said, that's not safe right now. And it may not be safe when we come back. I don't think people have thought through the idea that we might reach peak corona, but that doesn't mean you've necessarily been exposed to somebody, and there will be 100 million or 150 million or maybe slightly less. But if there are 80 million Americans, using US as an example, who have been exposed, if you have not been exposed and you start traveling, you're going to get exposed. Plus, we're a small company and we're very busy, and we expect people to work. I've mentioned this many times. If you've read things, I think if you're a licensee, it absolutely annoys the crud out of me that I fly in first class and I look up there and all these folks sitting in first class when the plane takes off, 3 or 4 of them are napping. A bunch of others are watching videos, and some are playing video games. These people are supposed to be busy, and I'm sure they brag about being busy. I'm so busy, I don't have time to do anything. I can't even see my family. But they get on a plane and they fall asleep Tuesday at 10 o'clock in the morning. Hogwash, okay? If you're working for me and you're flying from point A to point B on company business and it's normal work hours, you're going to be working. And it's a lot easier to work if you're in first class rather than coach. Could that still get cut? Yep. And believe me, in setting the example, Mike and I would set it first and we would go and coach. And if you know me, I'm 6'4", and I used to fit in coach, at least in exit row. But they've taken a lot of the pitch out of seats to the point where I don't know if
I'm 6'1", and I used to fit in coach as well.
Yeah.
But it's not because I'm getting any shorter that I don't fit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. Let's move on from flying, because I know that doesn't apply to everybody, but hopefully you're learning not just about what we're cutting, but how we're thinking about cutting it and why we're willing to cut it and what our choices are. We eliminated $1,700 a month in professional development expenses. We buy a lot of books. I take full responsibility for that. A lot of them are mine. We subscribe to various professional journals. We can do without that for a few months. I just had Wendy cancel my subscription to Journal of Management. I've read probably 5 or 6 of them now in the last year, and I find them indecipherable and incredibly unuseful. But I felt like I needed to subscribe to it and stay up with what's going on. Not right now, I don't.
Yeah, well, we've told everybody in the company, we'll pay for all your professional.
You want to
get a video about a particular technology, say in the technology space, or you want to read a book about a particular management tech, we'll pay for it all. Right now, it's not time.
Yeah. And look, I can work through my own backlog on my Kindle software on my iPad. I probably have 150 books I've yet to read. And I've been reading them, interestingly enough. Unfortunately, I made the mistake that during this non-travel period that one of the books I decided to reread was War and Peace. And I don't know if you know, but it's long.
Keep you busy for a while.
It's roughly
for you at least 3 days.
It's roughly the equivalent of the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. I think it measures in thousands of pages. Nevertheless, we've stopped paying for dry cleaning for our presenters and for their professional attire, and periodically reimbursing them to go out and get new clothes. That's another $1,200 a month. Years ago, we offered that, and we weren't sure. That was part of the reason we were doing it. We weren't sure several years ago when we start that process that we were paying our presenters enough for the value they were showing. And so we were looking for ways to supplement their income. And that was a nice thing to do to save them a little bit of money every month so their clothes would be clean. Now, though, it's probably a nice perk. And since they're not traveling, that should be zero. Now, there will be an impact to our presenters once they start traveling again. And they're okay with that. They're on board with the change. They understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. Now, final item. We said we weren't going to cut personnel, but we cut Mike and I's incomes by a total of $25,000 a month. Okay. We have savings. We can temporarily cut our free cash flow that we might invest for our retirement or for vacations or whatever. All that is gone. Okay. When you go through all that math, roughly, guys, I've rounded down or rounded up in some cases, but we freed up $50,000 a month. That's $600,000 a year. Or thinking about it the way we're thinking about it is the oxygen, cash is the oxygen, and the patient is us and our employees. $50,000, $600,000 is roughly 6 months of payroll. And no staff cuts or pay cuts to extend the viability of the company by, if you assume 8 months, that was a 2/3 improvement. So now we're up to 14 months. And it certainly doesn't affect the impact, or it doesn't have any impact on the quality of our guidance or our ability to deliver to clients and at public conferences when we're allowed to do so.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, Mike, I don't know about you, but I was really pleased with what we were able to cut. And by the way, folks, this is only a first-time deal. We're only at level 1 of the cutting here.
That's right. Well, I was pleased too, but then I looked at all the stuff we were spending money on. I was like, geez, how did we get to that? Like,
yeah.
15 years of cruft, I guess.
Yeah, look, that's exactly what it is. And we were good at this, we thought. But this exposed us. Times like this expose you. And we've already agreed we're going to have $2 million in cash the next time. Now, that's assumed we stay at this level at 5 million gross. If we're at 10 million gross, we're going to have 4 million. We're going to have enough to last a year to 18 months worth of paying everybody's salaries. And by the way, I think that's a recruiting advantage.
Yeah. All you
really
great people who would like to come work for Managed Tools, remember this.
Yeah, exactly. So we were both pleased that we're able to cut, but we were embarrassed, and we won't be embarrassed next time. We had spent the money, and now we had to spend time, and we did nothing else for 3 to 5 days around here, other than to write podcasts and so on, to figure out how to change that in the future. We were actually busy, guys. I'll just admit it. We were busy congratulating ourselves on the amount of cash we had and not realizing that there was more to be done every month for years. And we're good at it. And I would say maybe we're in the top third. And if I'm really going to tell you the truth, we're in the top quartile or top 20%.
Right. Yeah, we're good.
And we had not done enough.
Not enough.
But guys, as I mentioned, that was only our first run through of our costs, mostly of our recurring stuff. Mike had done some pretty impressive analysis of our historical cash flows in and out. He wanted to refine our spending about what was important and what wasn't, and to refine that as much as we could, determine how much more cutting we would need to do, identify more sources of frugality, however you want to call it. Now, look, when we capture expenses in accounting, every expense is tagged to a purchaser, a person, okay? Some of that is done by whose corporate card is used. And we mentioned that we use American Express, and we're going to talk more about that in a moment. But we created a report. So Mike created a report in QuickBooks broken down by individual for every single item that was spent on the company by the company in 2019. All, not payroll and not healthcare. We weren't going to show everybody in the company how much we paid everybody else. And everything in order to get at non-recurring spending that could either be avoided in the future or we could learn from regarding the choices we made with our cash in the past. The first thing we had done, the original review, Mike said he looked over the course of the year. He was actually talking about what we're talking about now. The first time he came up with that first list that we saved $50,000 a month, that was only based on 3 months worth of our expenses. Now, this review we're talking about now that included assigning it to people was over the past year. And the reason why is because you never know what you might find or what a particular expense might cause you to reconsider. We use Dropbox. It costs us $1,500 a year. We don't think about spending on Dropbox. We know we do, but it's not a monthly expense. It's an annual expense, which I think is cheaper. You pay at the start of the year, and I think we do the same thing with licenses. But look, there's nothing wrong with saying we need Dropbox, and we love Dropbox. But at $1,500 a year, what would be the features and benefits comparison to Apple iCloud? If it's noticeably cheaper, if it's $1 cheaper, that doesn't make sense because there's going to be work involved in moving all of our files over. But you'd have to do a features and benefits comparison. That kind of price shopping happens during these downturns. So Mike did all this work and then exported it all to a spreadsheet and put it in one spreadsheet. Everyone can see everyone else's expenses for the entire previous year. And let me tell you, it was a long list. It was long, thousands of items. Okay. So if I bought a golf book and put it on the corporate American Express rather than putting it on my personal credit card, everybody in the company is going to see that. I happen to think of it as it turned out to me to be a great sort of reverse version of social proof, right? Oh, hey, look, other people are doing this thing, so therefore I should do it. Oh my God, look, that's not good. You don't ever, I don't want people to think that we misspent corporate funds. And so what that means is, the next time we do this, anything you've spent money on that you shouldn't have spent money on is going to be for public display. And some of you would disagree with that, but Mike and I try really hard with staff to be open about most everything.
Yeah, it's not like they don't know it's there, folks. If you don't know, we review our finances and the P&L every single week. Every single charge in the company is reviewed every single week. So there's no hiding this stuff in our company. Now, I suspect that most of you don't get that. That's my guess.
Exactly. I think the idea that everyone knowing that all their spending choices with all the firm's money is going to be exposed to light of day scrutiny is a good use of social proof in the negative. So, okay. And Mike put this spreadsheet out on Google Docs, and then we had every one of us and us, Mike and I, had 36 hours to go over every item under their name and respond to each one. You had to respond. You had to review each one and provide an entrance data in the columns to the right of the item and its amount, whether or not it was a hidden or a recurring expense.
These are public responses, right?
Yeah.
Everyone saw
everyone else's work. Yeah. Whether it truly was required, what business needs the particular expense met, and the action taken to eliminate it. And I got to tell you, I expected to see all no's on virtually everything. And if there was a yes, I made sure that I agreed with the quote business need. And, it was over $100,000 on that list, Mike. I don't know if you saw that. I summed it just to see how much it was. $100,000. Okay. Now, guys, Mike mentioned this as a backdrop. Every week, everybody in our firm attends an operations meeting. It's Friday morning at 6:30 a.m. Pacific time. In that meeting, we review finances for the week. Every expense is on paper to every associate every week. Our accounting associate, Tracy, walks through all the revenues and whether they're high or low or in any way notable, and gives us percentages above or below standard and so on, and all the expenses we have by category. High expenses get discussed if we're doing our jobs right. Now, to be clear, we exempt payroll, other than each week there's a line in this discussion on these documents that we share with everybody. There's a line that says payroll accrual. And this is another thing that small companies are stupid. They feel like, well, I'll wait to have payroll. I'll wait to accrue payroll until the week I have to pay payroll. That's great until you have a bad month and then you don't have payroll. So we accrue payroll every week so that we have money at the end of the month to pay payroll. And again, we don't break payroll down by the individual checks going out. We break it down each week we put a certain amount aside into a payroll account, but it's a gross amount for everybody altogether. Now, they could multiply that by 52 weeks, I guess, and figure out exactly what the payroll of the firm is. I'm sure everybody in the firm has already done it. But that's even available if you're a public company, so we don't think of that as being violating anybody's privacy. Now, this meeting, the ops meeting, is sort of a drumbeat meeting about how we run the company each week, makes it much easier for us to ask these kinds of cost-cutting exercises during a downturn, to ask our staff to do this stuff, because they're used to seeing 10-plus page printouts of every single weekly expense and hearing us go over them. Our point for this is, if you're thinking about your family, you can't not have a budget, and you can't not go over every single spend every single week or every single month. You can't do it. Otherwise, stuff starts creeping in there that you don't know what it is. And it's not worth it to avoid a bit of a tension between you and your spouse, or you and a kid, for money they're spending, if in fact it creeps up and it becomes normal. And then suddenly, when you need cash in a downturn, you don't have it. The other way to handle this, of course, is just to pay yourself first, to put a whole bunch of money aside, cash, every month, and build up to our guidance about having 6 months worth of cash in an account that's in cash or immediately convertible to cash at no risk, so you can make it through the next downturn. And we mentioned credit cards earlier. I want to talk about that a little bit. In our case, several people in Manager Tools have American Express cards. If you're traveling, you certainly have an American Express card. Now, here's something most people don't know. We use American Express because it is a charge card. It's not a credit card. A charge card is intended to be paid off every billing period. It's essentially thought of as a convenience. And you might have heard retailers and merchants saying, "Oh, American Express charges us too much money for the convenience." And some places don't take American Express, but most places do. The reason why American Express charges more is because they're not set up to charge interest. Okay. Credit card companies are set up to make interest on the person who has the card. Yes, they charge the retailer for the maintenance of the network and so on, but Amex can't count on the income from interest. And so that's why they charge more. You may agree or disagree with the business model. We use an Amex because it is a charge card. Our Amex card has a monthly billing period. We pay it every week. I don't think it would be unusual, Mike, for us to have a month with $100,000 on the Amex, right?
Yeah, that's unusual, but 40,000 is happens all
you're
the
right.
time.
I'm sorry. I'm 40,000. Okay. The idea of a dip in our revenue such that a $40,000 Amex bill would be difficult to pay scares the hell out of us. So we assume that we go into Amex every week, and instead of waiting until the bill comes out, whatever we owe on each week, we pay that. People are probably thinking, these guys are insane. These guys are crazy. They're managing this stuff. They're all over this stuff. Yeah, guys. And we still don't have enough.
When you said the 100,000, were you talking about a monthly or weekly?
No, monthly.
Oh, we if we waited till the end of the month, we'd absolutely have over 100,000. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I thought you were talking.
No.
When I said 40,000, I was talking. We regularly pay 40,000 a week.
Yeah. And look, another reason to change it to get an Amex. We're not trying to push Amex. We're pushing the idea of a charge card rather than a credit card. Is we probably could attain a corporate credit card and get a very large credit limit. But guys, that's just a form of debt. And as you know, for those of you who know, I'm a baseball fan, and so one of my favorite movies is Moneyball. And in Moneyball, it says, "Man, I hate losing. I hate losing more than I like winning. I do, right? We hate debt more than we like cash, and just we like cash a lot, so that means we really, really, really hate debt.
Yeah. We don't have any debt, folks. I don't know if you said that. We have no debt.
And yeah, I can't imagine we ever will.
No.
Okay, so now what happened was Mike prepared all this stuff, and we had an all-hands meeting to discuss the expense eliminations. And just a tip of the hat to Maggie and Wendy and Paul and Tracy and Alex and Cassie and Kate and Sarah. Because I'll tell you, they didn't whine one bit about an expense that we had previously agreed to pay, but we expected them to go in there and cut with reckless abandon, and they did.
They were awesome.
In fact, more than we had planned on it. The plan was to go through this and then for Mike to announce the reductions. And we decided to go a step further because we'd gotten rid of stuff. And by the way, the beauty of having it all on one list is everybody got to see everybody else's expenses, and that might remind them about things they were doing that they shouldn't do going forward. But the final nail in the coffin, so to speak, was from that point forward, we had cut out any chance that, we're not buying this, the extra, we're not buying that, we're not buying this going forward, we're not doing this, we're not doing this. Hey, can we save money by doing it this way, and so on. And then we said, no expenses, no charges, no costs, no spending money over $25 without approval.
Man, we are draconian, aren't we?
That I got to tell you, it was interesting that I think one of us said 50 and one of us said 25, because we think, as Jeremy Irons says in Margin Call, this is it. Okay. I don't hear any music playing at all for the foreseeable future. Look, it's a significant threat. It's worse than 2008. It's worse than 9/11. We could be wrong, but even if we are willing to induce administrative pain in the near term on our firm to save our cash for the long term. Okay. Now, look, what that means is, Wendy has to write me, has to send an email. What we told everybody, you want to spend more than $25. This was for a very short period. We'll tell you what phase 2 is in a moment. For a very short period, if you want to spend more than $25 on something, you had to write Mike and I an email. Both of us copied on the mail saying, hey, I want to spend this much money for this. The beauty of that, of course, is it gives us insight. And so we know when people are spending money. It also means people have to ask themselves, do I want to ask for this money? So they add to the idea that they have to justify it in their own mind. And, I think I've learned that people don't necessarily justify things in their own mind. In fact, full disclosure, 5 years ago, I would have told all my people, if it's not $1,000, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want you to ask me for approval. And the reason for that is I don't want to approve your stuff. If you make a bad choice, I'll tell you about it. I'll give you some negative feedback, and you should know that's coming too, because we review all of our expenses every month. What she was asking for was $85 to print 2 copies of a collection of all of our guidance on interviewing, because we are going to, the next book that we're going to come out with is how to be interviewed. Our interviewing series put into book form. I was going to have those all organized, and I was going to have it printed out, and I was going to carry it around with me, probably in 2 volumes, because that's how I edit my writing. I print it out and then I mark it up. And so $85 doesn't seem like that much, but I said no, which Wendy was sort of surprised about, because she thought that's not that much money. But it gave me a chance to send a message about how tight we were going to be, because we believe this is it. And I realized all I needed was the PDF. I can put the PDF on my iPad, and the software for marking up a document on iPad is great. And anytime I make a mark on a page, all I do is take a screenshot of it, or I save the entire PDF with the markups and send that to Wendy, and she can edit the document, and we don't have to spend $85. And if I can go around figuring out ways to spend $85 and we come within $5,000 or $10,000 of running out of cash, I would have thought that I did the right thing. And I don't care that people don't like how hard this is at all. If you want to survive the tough times, you got to be willing to do tough things. As I've said before, it may be apocryphal, but it's one of those apocryphal stories that's worth it. When Admiral King was confronted by Winston Churchill in a World War II meeting between the various staffs, the British and American armies and navies. And Churchill said to King, who was known to be irascible, he says, you're a very difficult guy to get along with. And he says, in war, sir, they send for the sons of bitches. That's me. So I don't care. I don't care how, I'm serious, guys. I'm not here to tread lightly. I intend to step on your toes because I am not thinking about your toes. I'm thinking about our mission and the future of the company. Okay.
Thank God.
Yeah. Well, look, this is all because of you in the last couple of weeks. You're the one that's been doing all the heavy liftings behind the scenes. Now, look, guys. So we started that way. And then one of us, it probably was Mike, we had a small epiphany. Why not just get rid of all the credit cards? Nobody's going anywhere, right? They don't need credit cards. Just cancel them. Nobody can buy anything without going through Mike or me, although I said, fine, cancel mine too. Turns out, even better, we didn't have to cancel them and then plan on reconstituting them later. It might have been an issue if a client called once restrictions were lifted and said, can you be here tomorrow? Amex allows us to pause them. So everybody's credit card was paused in the company, but Mike's. Now look, here was our thinking. If client and conference income, revenue, which we realized because we've delivered the event, okay? If that income is zero, which is true right now, we have cash from them, but we can't spend that cash because we haven't delivered the event. Okay, there's a difference between revenue and income. Okay, even if license and digital product sales stay stable, these kinds of cost cuts are necessary against the new lower gross revenue that the firm is going to be making. In fact, if you've noticed, if you listen to our other podcasts, no, I think in this podcast, actually, I mentioned that our ads were about licenses. For many of you, you've been listening for years, and we don't have an economic or commercial relationship with you because you listen and it's free, and we want you to listen for free. But if you ever thought about becoming a licensee, now's the time to do it. Because our mission, we're realizing our mission, if this depression goes on for 2 years, Mike, could we make it 2 years? Could we
with no revenue?
Could we hold our noses and take on some debt and last for 2 years? I don't think so. Right?
Oh, man.
Well, the problem is nobody would. That would be a global depression pandemic. Yeah. Now look, guys, maybe you think all this is an overreaction, but here's another example. My new iPad that I bought right before we shut all this down has mouse support. Okay. But funnily enough, my wife Rhonda and I don't have an extra mouse in the house. Am I going to buy one? A month ago, I said, yes, it's $100. Today, nope. And guess what? I saved $100. $100 less that we have to save to get to our new cash number, which is $2 million. Now, look, might it benefit me to have the mouse? Yeah, it is. Is it worth it? I don't know. It's an individual choice. But when I compare my benefit to the peace of mind of Mike and I to our staff, knowing we have $2 million next time we get here, to tide us over in a tough economic time, it's not much of a choice. My iPad was already pretty fantastic. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, all of our friends up there. And look, guys, obviously we're going to be turning back on people's credit cards as soon as we start traveling again. Now, you think we're done, guys. We're not. We also reviewed Mike's detailed client and conference review projections. We're not only looking at cutting, we're also looking at how is the cash going to decay? Are there cuts we can delay? Because it won't matter until the revenue starts to become a problem. Actually, that sounds wrong, but it helps us to know what the decay rate is based on when we will get paid or when we'll have to deliver things. And in some cases, obviously, we have to spend before we get paid. And so we need to make sure we can spend in order to get paid. And that means certain cash is actually more important than other cash. Mike took every client engagement we had scheduled and put the relevant economic facts into a spreadsheet that had decay rates and times and over the course of the next year. There were roughly 20 presentations that were scheduled. Typically, presentations, client engagements are scheduled for 2 to 3 months out. And there are 20 engagements representing roughly 35 presenting days, which is roughly $500,000 in gross revenue. Right now, we're certainly not taking in any of that revenue, okay, let alone income. He took and said, okay, show me the dates that it was due to be presented, the presenter who was going to present it, if it was already canceled, if they just said, no, I think we've only had one cancellation. Company says no, and we're not going to be able to do this for the next year in light of where we are right now. The vast majority of them deferred. Some of them deferred to a specific date, which helps our modeling of cash going forward. Some of them just said, we will do this, but we'll defer. And if the economy continues to stay bad, those deferrals, which we might be counting on the cash, will become cancellations, which means that cash in the model will go away. We also then set a percentage risk of complete loss. And the way you do that, if you've never seen that before, is let's say we're going to make $30,000 on a couple of day presentation to a client, but we believe there's a 50% chance they'll cancel. The way you model that is you say, okay, we're only going to make $15,000 on that. Now, you might say, well, no, you're not going to make 30 or 0. You're right. But we can't model 30 or 0. We can't do all the permutations and combinations of every single client either paying us or not paying it. So you put a weighted likelihood on it, and you use that to give you a sense of how much money will we be making when we start making money again, and how much cash will we have burned through, and then can we keep it low enough so that we can essentially ride out the storm. That's how these things work. We also looked at the month something would be presented. When did the client talk about delaying to? Okay. And then we also looked at the month we would be paid, right? We invoice a client. They may not pay us. I think our terms are net 30. We double that to net 60 because we assume, like during most down times.
Well, we didn't change our terms. We just
I'm sorry. That's right. I apologize. Our assumption in the models is that people won't pay us as fast. And so we doubled it to however many our average day sales outstanding. That's called DSO for those of you who don't know. We doubled it in the model so we could be conservative. So we didn't think we were going to get paid for something when in fact the behavior of people is we're going to pay slower. Now, do we agree with being paid slower? No. In fact,
are we doing it?
No, we don't do that. We tolerate our clients taking a while to pay us, and we pay our vendors immediately. Now, maybe you think that's a wrong way to do it, and we should do it the way the big companies do and just slow pay everything. I mean, literally, the check is in the mail thing is a joke, except we hear it a couple of times a year from big companies. Like, embarrassing. And we're going back and forth. Oh, we haven't found it. Oh, you need to send it to this address and so on. That's just somebody saying that's somebody. And I hate to say it, but one of these people who does this in terms of paying people and being responsible for vendor relationships was touted for these very tactics in the Wall Street Journal in the last 6 months. And that's not who we want to be. And then, by the way, he did that for every single client engagement we have. And then he did the same thing for every single one of our conferences, all 25 of them for the remainder of the year. How many of the 200 attendees that were already signed up have taken refunds? What are our food and beverage minimums? How many have deferred? In other words, how many people who were scheduled to attend have already said, I want to defer? What are the costs we've already incurred with some events at some hotels that we shouldn't assume will be refunded? What is our break-even point for each event? You figured that out, okay? Assuming that new registrations will lag historical averages because of the recession. Now, you might say, well, you don't know what those numbers are. No, we don't, but we can guess. And we've been doing this for 15 years, and we think our guess is pretty accurate. But it will help us understand when the revenue curve will start to rise to help us mitigate the problem of the cash we're going through. Now, we have estimates for our cash inflows about which we're reasonably confident. They're not perfect. They're going to be wrong, but they're giving us an idea. It'll tell us whether or not our cash will last through this period, this economic dip. Now, look, these estimates are gradually going to become outdated, But that's not the point. We have captured what are facts. We have then made reasonable estimates of all the factors affecting the cash inflows. We affect the cash outflows. That's our choice. But the inflows are controlled by somebody else. Because of these models, we can predict changes to our cash situation months in advance in order to make spending choices now. Now, again, is it perfect? No. That's not possible because we don't know what the economy will do, but we're obligated as leaders, as executives, to have a considered opinion now, and that opinion will help us make decisions today.
Isn't that always the case, though, in a crisis? High seas in particular have this problem, which is, I don't know.
I can't
know,
yeah.
and therefore I can't do anything.
Be wrong. Yeah. But here's the beauty of it, right? Even if we're a little bit wrong, we're smarter in terms of the choices we make today. And we can change these models based on the behavior that happens within them because we've captured all the inputs. If you don't build the model, you don't have the inputs, and you haven't thought through the inputs and the potential pressures on the various places where cash will come or cash will go. And then you can't adjust the model. And then you're stuck to do the exact same thing again. If you get to a place of true final crisis at work or with your home finances, where you look back and you realize that there were signs you didn't see or choices you could have made, but you didn't, you haven't done your job. It's better to be in pain today than dead tomorrow. You know, we've always said about communication, there are three possible amounts when you communicate: too much, too little, or exactly right. Except if you're talking about trivial instances. Do you want a beer? Yes. Okay. Exactly the right amount of communication is unachievable, right? I don't know how much communication you want from me or vice versa. That means basically our choices in life when it comes to communication is a fundamental one. Either you're going to try to err on the side of too much or too little communication. But what's funny is when you put it that way, everybody we know always laughs at the thought experiment and then says, yeah, you're right. I should be communicating too much because the outcomes around too little are too great. And the same is true with cost cutting, guys. The chance we get this exactly right are marginally zero. Okay. So the choice is cutting too much or cutting too little. The results of cutting too much are annoyance and frustration, and perhaps a change in your lifestyle. The result of too little cutting is organizational death. This is not even an argument, okay? And look, guys, if you go through a similar process now, professionally or personally, when there is a next slowdown versus this meltdown, you'll already have the skills and models to go through it proactively. You won't spend your time thinking about your demise, actually worrying about your demise. And for some reason, my tweet, worry is like a rocking chair, gives you something to do, but doesn't get you anywhere, is, in my world at least, gone viral, which is to say 100 people have retweeted it. You won't spend time worrying about your demise. You'll be thinking about your employees and your customers. And guys, that's the problem. If you want to be successful, you're going to have to think about your customers. Right now, you can't not think about costs. But you need to have models and do this exercise and get a plan in place, which is what we did. We're not bragging. We just thought you'd like to hear how we did it because it's easy to talk in theory, but we thought we'd talk in black and white because you want to get back to thinking about customers.
Yeah, and remember, folks, if you think this is harsh, remember, we're not cutting employees.
Yeah, that's the problem. Employees are the biggest darn bucket, and so people go after employees because it's easy, because they haven't done the hard work. Cut everything else first. Maybe it gives you 2 or 3 months, and maybe that's enough. Your employees will remember.
Yeah, and the more people are working, the more people are buying stuff, and the faster we're going to recover. So we're trying to do our part.
We end the show this week yet again with another shout out to a long-term licensee. Christopher Favre has been with us for, 13, 14 years now. And we are thrilled that our work has been able to help you, Christopher, and humbled that you've agreed to stay with us this long. And we hope to do that for many more years to come. Christopher Favre, thank you.
Folks, we'll talk to you again tomorrow.
Bye.